Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Thought for the Day with your local friendly neighbourhood head of sixth form. I'd like to talk to you today about a concept, anti-fragility. It's well known that the Germans don't have a good word for Schadenfreude, and anti-fragility is a word that we need in our language that sadly we don't have. And a philosopher, Nassim Taleb, who I've enjoyed reading some of his works, has come up with this. Right, today's Thought for the Day will be brought to you by an egg, a tea towel, and a tennis ball, but more of them later. Let's get on with it. Right, Nassim Taleb, his big breakthrough book was called The Black Swan. And what you have to know about a black swan is that it used to be, in the kind of 1700s, a phrase of, there's no such thing. It's a black swan. There's no such thing. It'll never happen. Captain Cook discovered Australia, and there's a black swan for you. So it did. Now, in fact, the proverb kind of changed, and people started saying to each other, it's a bit of a black swan. It's like something you never thought you'd see, something you never thought would happen. And Nassim Taleb has gone around pointing out how many things do people think wouldn't happen, but they do happen. Floods higher than they've ever been before, or higher temperature, or things like that. There is Nassim Nicholas in his gym. I like this guy. He had a bodyguard who got him lifting weights in his 50s. He's older than I am. And he talked about when he deadlifted 100 kg. And he talked about how he knew his body the muscles were knitting themselves back together and reforming so that they could lift 105 kg. Because his body understood that the worst that can happen the worst that has happened isn't always the worst that can happen. And that, the absence of any evidence that a flood could be this high or something like this could happen isn't quite the same as the evidence of absence. Let's get on to today's thought for today. The concept of anti-fragility. He wrote a whole book about it, and he wants to talk about things that gain from disorder, i.e. over time, when things that happen, the kind of erosion or things come along, these are the things that challenge, and some things survive and some things don't. I can feel a little experiment coming on, but I'm going to get out there and let's have a little look at the egg experiment.
People think there's a certain kind of strength there. So first up, we have our egg. Normal egg. Some people think there's a certain kind of strength there, but I am going to represent the forces of disorder and chaos in life over time. I'm going to be able to give it a bit of a black swan event, because it probably didn't expect this, but we're going to hurl it at the ground and see how it copes. Ready? Our egg seems to have been rather fragile.
Well, what else did you expect, really? I've got my tea towel experiment down here. We'll put that one on next.
Right, second up, we have a tea towel. The original experiment was a beanbag, but the tea towel will serve equally well. So, the forces of disorder, overtime, chaos, things that can happen to the tea towel. And there's the tea towel. Now, you'll see it remains undamaged by its experience. Dusted off a bit. I mean, fairly resilient.
And finally, I have up here the tennis ball.
Our third item is the tennis ball. And so I am going to hurl this tennis ball at the ground, and we'll see what happens to it. How does it cope with the force of disorder and chaos?
That's gone.
I do believe it did at least bounce back higher than it came down.
Right, let's go back to presenting. Right, so what have we learnt? Hopefully we've learnt that eggs are fragile. I could have done it with a glass as well, but some things don't last very long, because when problems come along, they break. Some things are resilient. Resilience is a flag value. It's a good thing. They are as good after the event as they were before it. But this is his concept of the diametric opposite to fragile. Some things gain when things happen, events happen, chaos. They benefit from it. Our tennis ball bounced back higher than it was when I threw it at the ground, and my particular tennis ball made a big for freedom, and I still haven't found it. Right, I could explain perhaps equally as well using trees. The tree here was fragile. The wind blew, it cracked. It was brittle. The trees in the middle are bending with the wind. You probably heard the expression, go with the flow. They will stand up when the storm's gone. They will survive. But the tree, the sycamore, seed at the end represents those trees who, when the wind comes, think now's a good time to release the seeds, and they benefit. They're actually better off for the high wind coming. How do you apply this? You might think about it yourself. Are you sometimes a bit fragile in terms of when bad things happen, you kind of, it hurts and you end up worse? Or are you resilient? Do you end up the other side of things as good as you were going in? Or, purpose of this thought for the day, maybe sometimes you kind of, do you see the opportunities? In this time of lockdown, are you taking up new hobbies, reading books you wouldn't have done, and enhancing your life in other ways so it gets better? Really, Nassim Nicholas Taleb would want you to think about systems. I've put the NHS there as an example, but he looked at all banks and sort of, across society. But the NHS, if it was fragile, then when the people, the virus hit, it would be overwhelmed and it wouldn't be able to cope and it would be really bad. If the NHS is resilient, then we will have the same NHS in a year's time. It hasn't been overwhelmed. But if the NHS is going to show some anti-fragility, it will be learning from everything that's going on. It'll be investing in cures and vaccines and actually realizing how do you handle a population at a time of plague. So if some worse plague comes along, in fact, it can cope because it knows exactly what we need to do to beat it. Perhaps I should also look at Pangbourne College at this, which is what suggests the idea. I remember, all being sent home that Thursday and actually feeling a little bit sort of, is this bad for Pangbourne? And then, we got our online lessons going and I felt actually, we're going to beat this thing together. And now, amongst members of Common Room, we're all chatting about so many ideas of, online. What can we do online? Revision courses, setting up A-level courses, different ways of teaching, overcoming sort of snow days and things like that. So we're kind of looking at all the benefits we can get from the current period. So that, good people, is my thought for the day. That would be a really good book that you could read, but I've read it for you. But the concept of anti-fragility. We need a word in our language that means the opposite of breakable. That means actually we benefit when things get tough. Okie doke, you get on to your lessons and I'm going to look for how I switch this thing off and stop it recording.